Hello everyone, and welcome back. This is the 6th episode in my series covering the complete history of Good Game Empire. If you missed the previous episodes, you can find a link to the full playlist in the video description. Today we're talking about 2017. Unfortunately, 2017 was not a good year for Good Game Empire, or Good Game Studios. In this episode, in addition to covering all of the updates the game received, we'll talk about 4 extremely controversial decisions Good Game Studios made. First, though, Good Game Studios began the year with another round of layoffs. This time, approximately 200 employees were affected. Good Game Studios explained that the free-to-play games market was becoming increasingly competitive, but it assured Empire players that their experience would not be interrupted. For the most part, this proved true. Empire continued to receive updates at a steady pace. Nevertheless, as Dan Pearson of GamesIndustry.biz remarked, Good Game Studios' contraction marked a sharp turn in the company's fortunes. Good Game Studios had grown from approximately 100 employees around the time of Empire's beta release in August 2011 to a peak of approximately 1,200 in March 2016. And as recently as November 2014, Good Game Studios had reported a 28,000% growth in revenues over a 5-year span. I was on the map as a content creator by this time, with approximately 2,000 subscribers at the beginning of the year. In February, I received an invitation to participate in Good Game Studios' latest initiative, the closed beta server. As the name suggests, this was a private testing environment where experienced players could provide feedback directly to the developers. I was excited by the opportunity to receive a preview of upcoming content so I could make videos covering game updates more quickly. Community manager Evoke seems to have been the driving force behind the closed beta server. When she left Good Game Studios just 2 months later, the project effectively flatlined. The first few updates of 2017 centered around performance improvements and the reintroduction of the Battle for Barrowmond. As I think we've already discussed in this series, Barrowmond had historically been glitchy due to the Barrowmond watchtowers being shared targets among all players on the server and the corresponding amount of troop movement while the event was active. In March, Good Game Studios added a new LTPE themed after King Eric, a new character meant to be the ruler of the Great Empire. A new decoration, the Once and Future Kings, was added. I think it represented some of the best of Good Game Studios' artwork. A special version of the Traveling Knights event challenged the player to collect pieces of King Eric's family portrait. Also, the Robber Baron Fortress received a festive Shamrock-themed reskin to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. In a Q2-Q3 roadmap, Good Game Studios reiterated its focus on performance and fairness improvements. It also made some extremely unpopular announcements. I have quite a bit to say about these announcements. As a heads up, for part of while I'm talking, I'll show some PvP footage on the screen. It's unrelated. First, Good Game Studios said that it planned to implement strict caps on the effects players could receive from gems. This was a big deal, as Good Game Studios had recently added paid equipment sets like the Elementalist and the Legacy of the Eagle Demon that had extremely powerful gems. While the sets themselves would not be affected, players had figured out something that Good Game Studios apparently had not. Players had taken those extremely powerful gems and added them to other equipment sets in the game. Take, for example, the 5-piece Winged Knight set. This practice resulted in commanders and castellans more powerful than Good Game Studios had apparently contemplated, and it was the reason for the change. The issue, of course, was that anyone could have told Good Game Studios that players would do this. Creative use of gems was not only fair play, it was good strategy in what was supposed to be a strategy game. And Good Game Studios was profiting from the practice too, since it meant players were purchasing more premium equipment. Indeed, many players believed, reasonably in my view, that Good Game Studios had delayed implementing this nerf specifically to encourage players to spend money on the gems. I remember reading about one player on the forums who had purchased 4 gems from the Legacy of the Eagle Demon set, specifically intending to use them with his Winged Knight set. Of course, now he couldn't do that. No longer being able to use something you had bought for the purpose you intended felt like, and in just about every way was, a bait and switch. Naturally, the forums lit up with player complaints. In response, Good Game Studios created a new vendor called the Apprentice Blacksmith. Players would be granted a certain amount of apprentice tokens as compensation to spend on new equipment. It was a good way of completing the unfinished LTPE sets most players had several of in their inventory. Gem removal was also temporarily made free. If anything good came out of the gem effect cap controversy, it's that the Apprentice Blacksmith provided the genesis for the Master Blacksmith, which was added in 2019. In the same roadmap, Good Game Studios also announced its decision to pause running the Battle for the Royal Capital. We talked about the many technical problems with this event last time, but the Battle for the Royal Capital was still, as far as I remember, a favorite among players. I and many others have been working to purchase all 9 pieces of the Relics of the Royal Warriors Commander set. Good Game Studios' decision to suspend the Battle for the Royal Capital meant the set could not be completed. Players also grew frustrated because, though Good Game Studios had taken out the event, it had left the Royal Capitals unchanged. This meant that, on each server, whichever alliance had had the good fortune to win the last Battle for the Royal Capital continued to receive the food production bonus for an unexpectedly long time. Indeed, as far as players knew then, this perk was to last indefinitely. Good Game Studios initially left things ambiguous as to whether or when the Battle for the Royal Capital would return. Much later, in fall 2018, Good Game Studios suggested that it would be run again once the problems with it were fixed. The following March, however, Good Game Studios announced that the event had, in fact, been permanently removed. Rubies and resources spent out of the Alliance funds to develop the Alliance city were eventually refunded. In my opinion, the removal of the Alliance cities and the Battle for the Royal Capital was downright tragic. Clearly, as we discussed last time, significant developer time and resources had gone into the event. It had been 2016's defining update. While conceitedly broken, the event had also been fun, and featured a game mechanic that was different from anything else in Empire. Now that several years have passed, we can see that some of the features associated with the Battle for the Royal Capital did make their way back into the game. For example, I'd be willing to bet that Good Game Studios reused some of the code that controlled where the Alliance capitals appeared on the map when it added the Con Camp component of the Nomad invasion. And Alliance influence is now an important mechanic in a modern event called Beyond the Horizon. We'll talk about that event again when we get to 2019. Let me know in the comments what you think, especially if you played Empire during this time. Was the Battle for the Royal Capital beyond fixing, or did Good Game Studios give up on it prematurely? Do you remember the event being as fun or as broken as I've described it? Okay, time to move on. In April, Good Game Studios adjusted the in-game achievements. Those related to the Alchemist were removed, as that feature had been fully replaced by build items. New achievements were added for supporting Alliance members, defeating foreign invaders, upgrading the Hall of Legends, and healing wounded units. In May, Good Game Studios announced something called the Battle of Nations. It was essentially another layer of the LTPE. Players collected rewards as a server, rather than on an individual basis. The narrative backdrop of the Battle of Nations was that players would be helping King Eric reclaim his throne. The event, though, was kind of a dud. Unless you were reading the forums or Good Game Studios' promotional emails, you might not have even been aware it was happening. In July, Good Game Studios added the Khan's Revenge component to the Nomad invasion. Level 70 players who were in an alliance would now see a special target, the Khan camp, outside their alliance leader's main castle. The camp was, of course, attackable. Attacking the camp would enrage the Khan, potentially leveling him up or enabling you to taunt him into attacking your castle. A significant amount of rage points were needed to level the Khan, and each attack against him triggered a longer cooldown for the attacking player. While the cooldown could be bypassed using skips, it only reset when the Khan leveled up or at midnight, or whatever the daily reset time was for your server. The Khan camp, however, was a shared target with the rest of your alliance. If you were all attacking the Khan together, you'd level it up quickly. A higher level con camp had stronger defenses and sent stronger attacks, but you'd gain more currency from interacting with it. Con tablets could be looted by attacking the con, or the 4 regular nomad camps, which remained unchanged by this update. Con medals were awarded for successfully defending your castle against a con attack. Prizes you could purchase with con medals included build items, material bags, and new decorations. The Con's Revenge was, by most accounts, a pretty solid update. It meant there were once again meaningful differences between the Nomad and Samurai invasions. Players appreciated being able to collect con tablets more quickly. Usually, players used con tablets to purchase Horsetail standards to boost glory gained in the Foreign and Bloodcrow invasions. Then, Good Game Studios announced a third controversial change. At a couple different points in this series, I've mentioned that extra resources looted equipment didn't quite work as intended. Here's how the game calculated the loot you were to receive from a successful attack. First, the game looked at the target's inventory and the looting capacity of your attacking troops. Using these factors, the game assigned a certain amount of loot. Only afterward did the game take extra resources looted equipment into account. Accordingly, your initial loot value could be increased by up to 70%, even if the new value exceeded what your target had in storage. In essence, the process magically created new resources. To some extent, this made sense if we assume that Good Game Studios didn't intend the attacker's use of extra resources looted equipment to punish the defender. The issue, of course, is that this was exploitable. Players first sent valuable resources, usually kingdom resources, food, or aquamarine, to friendly targets, either allies or their own second accounts. Then, they attacked those targets using extra resources looted equipment to loot more resources than they had sent. Voila! This method was quicker and better than actually producing any of the resources using production buildings. Not having to build most types of production buildings allowed the player to use more castle space for public order. Resource farming, as this technique was called, was a widely used strategy, at least on the United States server. Most high-level buildings, including the Hall of Legends, required a ton of kingdom resources to upgrade. I also remember that players had set up whole Skype rooms to coordinate aquamarine trades with their allies. Good Game Studios was kind of upset, and they newly announced a nerf for the extra resources looted equipment. Good Game Studios described that nerf as a bug fix, even though equipment had operated in this way in Empire for almost 5 years. Indeed, I think the significant delay before Good Game Studios had acted was the real issue. Players had become accustomed to using this strategy. Taking it out slowed their progress, made the game less fun, and also made the game less fair. That's because some players had already used resource farming to develop their castles. Now, everyone else would be prevented from efficiently catching up. In an attempt to offset the change, Good Game Studios buffed the amount of kingdom resources looted from NPC targets. New levels to the Master Builder were also added, making construction cheaper for those who could afford the Master Builder's ruby cost. That brings us to controversial change number 4. This one's a doozy. Good Game Studios removed all free sources of Lucky Pennies. Lucky Pennies, you'll recall, enabled the player to double a set amount of resources at the Wishing Well. Up to this point, the Wishing Well had been a community favorite feature since it benefited free-to-play players. There was less of a need to visit the payment shop if you could get more rubies for free just by playing the game. Naturally, this was a problem from Good Game Studios' perspective. If my memory is correct, Good Game Studios removed all sources of Lucky Pennies, paid or otherwise. Players kept the Lucky Pennies in their inventories. However, once they ran out, the Wishing Well, which they might have spent rubies to upgrade, would be useless. This was frustrating for players and is a confusing aspect of how Good Game Studios dealt with this problem. All in all, I guess controversial might not actually be an accurate description for any of these changes, as it implies there was a debate within the community. Nevertheless, let me know what you think in the comments. Which of the 4 changes we've discussed was the most egregious, in your opinion? Also in July, Good Game Studios added new decorations and 9-piece equipment sets as updated rewards for the Nomad and Samurai invasions. There was also a new LTPE that brought the Fortunes of the Desert Sands, probably the game's best ever unique NPC commander. The uniform of the Nutcracker Warrior that was added the following winter was arguably better since it offered 50% cooldown reduction, but it didn't have as much courtyard strength. In August, Good Game Studios reworked the castle overview, breaking it into 4 separate tabs: economy, military, miscellaneous, and currencies, and causing it to display a lot more information. This was a welcome change. Another welcome change was the new food freeze feature that kicked in during planned downtimes. It meant players would no longer lose troops due to desertion while offline during an update, or in the first few hours after an update. August also saw additional levels for certain research, new premium combo tools at the Armorer, and a rebalancing of the gift trader to make it accessible to lower-level players. September saw another series of small changes. The equipment storage cap was increased, target coordinates were added to battle reports, and the Foreign and Bloodcrow invasions got better rewards. An Oktoberfest-themed LTPE ran. Good Game Studios also made 3 changes related to the market value of rubies. First, it nerfed the amount of rubies players collected from Robber Baron Towers. Second, Good Game Studios added a new repeatable quest entitled Friend of the True King, which rewarded double rubies on any payment shop purchase for collecting a set amount of season points. This offer couldn't be combined with the usual prime times, however, so in essence, it was simply a 100% prime time on demand. Third, Good Game Studios fixed an exploit that had allowed players to cash in on expired offers simply by keeping the payment shop open. Now is perhaps as good of a time as ever to mention the other major payment shop exploit players were using. That exploit was based on the fact that Good Game Studios sold rubies at different prices in different international markets. By using a VPN, players could access the payment shop associated with a different region than their own and purchase rubies at a discount. A package of 30,000 rubies might cost $20 US, for example, but only the equivalent of $5 US when purchased for Indian rupees. I'm just using that as an example, by the way. I'm not sure what the best currency to purchase rubies with was, and I believe this exploit has long since been fixed, though I don't know how. Don't try it. It's arguably fraud, and I'm sure Good Game Studios issues permanent bans for this. I know it persisted in the game for a while, though. Obviously, players exploiting the payment shop to purchase rubies at steep discounts presented a major fairness issue. In October, the Nailbiter LTPE returned, with updated tools, units, and a 9-piece equipment set. Good Game Studios also quietly introduced the Artifacts of the Shadow King. This 5-piece commander set was noteworthy for 2 reasons. First, despite being intended for lower-level players, it was actually quite powerful, especially when combined with gems from the Attack of the Shapeshifters event that was about to be added. The other notable aspect of this set, however, was that it unlocked through a quest chain. As we'll see in a moment, this was a prelude of what was to come. Good Game Studios also introduced 2 new premium buildings: the University, which boosted the speed of research, and the Forge, which boosted the speed of tool production. The cost of these buildings probably exceeded whatever benefit they might have provided, and players were also reluctant to construct anything that took up space which would otherwise be used for public order. Just as the Apprentice Blacksmith disappeared, old event sets began appearing for rubies at the equipment trader. Again, this allowed players to complete sets for which they were missing pieces. In November, the quest book received its first major update, probably since the New Kingdoms were added back in 2013, or at least since October, when the Artifacts of the Shadow King had appeared. The update introduced time-limited Royal Quest campaigns. Each quest tasked the player to collect a certain amount of event currency. Completing the entire campaign netted the player a serious reward, like a top decoration or equipment set. The first Royal Quest campaign reward was the Artifacts of the Ivory Queen. In my opinion, this set and its matching decoration are among some of Empire's best artwork. Royal Quest campaigns were unforgiving. If you didn't complete the quest associated with Barremond, say, while the Barremond invasion was active, you'd be stuck on it until that event reappeared. Meanwhile, the campaign was likely to expire. If you didn't complete the entire Royal Quest campaign, you'd likely be left with a piece or two missing from your new commander set, which rendered it more or less useless. Naturally, quests not finished in time could be completed for rubies, but the price was astronomical. This was a trend, by the way, of updates added around this time. As we just discussed, the University and Forge were very expensive, and when gem removal ceased being free, players were a little surprised at its new ruby cost. Clearly, Good Game Studios was reacting to, but also contributing to, the ruby inflation. November's other additions included another level for the marketplace, new material bags and gift peddler packages, and a new LTPE, the Merry Moon festivities, with the 9-piece Nutcracker set that was mentioned earlier. Good Game Studios quickly realized how good the Nutcracker set was, and substituted the Trinkets of the Everwinter Soldier set in its place when the Merry Moon festivities ran again in December. Good Game Studios capped off a tumultuous year in style, reporting $1 billion in lifetime revenues. That wasn't all, though. Good Game Studios went public through a reverse merger into the Stillfront Group. In layman's terms, this means that the ownership of Good Game Studios kind of changed. You see, Good Game Studios had been founded as a private company in 2009 by Fabian Ritter and the brothers Christian and Kai Warzenek. Using Stillfront, the three founders effectively sold Good Game Studios to the investing public. That's right, if you weren't aware, Stillfront is publicly held and traded, meaning you can become a partial owner of Good Game Studios. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, though. Stillfront stock has fallen from a price of about $15 in 2021 to, at the time of recording, 96 cents. At the time of the original sale to the Stillfront Group, Good Game Studios' original founders remained involved, both as directors and officers of either Good Game Studios or Stillfront, and second, also through their investment company, Laureus Capital. You see, they retained a significant investment in Stillfront. It's unclear whether they got out before the stock price collapsed. If they did, I think you've got to give it to them. They owned Good Game Studios for the entirety of its meteoric rise, becoming rich in the process before passing off ownership to folks like you and I in the investing public and getting out before things went south. And that's all I have on 2017. I appreciate that you made it to the end of this video, and frankly that you even clicked on this episode, as I am imagining that viewers will have the least interest in the game's middle years. Do me a favor, like the video and comment below with your thoughts. If you include the word legend in your comment, I'll know that you finished the video, and I'll try to react to your post. See you next time.